Good morning, everyone. It's me again. Just wanted to make this video to kind of lay out my stance lay out my worldview and how I look at things. But at the same time, I want to also make the point that I don't expect everyone to think like I do. I mean, to believe what I do. I know that that's not true. I know how personal it is what we believe in. I want to make it clear that way, my stance is known. That way, if you come at me, you know how I view things, and you know how I look at it. And like I said, I also want to know, and I accept how other people look at it, how other people see it, because not everyone looks at things the same way. That was one of my main points on the first video, but I just want to talk a little bit about why and how I came to believe and be the person that I am now. And I'm going to testify, but first, of course, I always want to start in prayer and just ask, Jesus, I pray that you keep the words that come out of my mouth true, and that you help me and lead me to all truth, and to proclaim the truth, Jesus, for your glory and for everybody's good, Jesus, because that's who you are, and what you want is the good for us. You love us, and I thank you for this, and I pray that you watch over and guide all of us, and that your Spirit be poured out in power across the whole world, all in your mighty and beautiful name. Amen. Well, I'm gonna lay out my testimony just real quick. I want to make a real quick thing. I'm not trying to make a very long video, so I'm gonna sum it up probably faster than I ever have. But I want to kind of skip ahead. I grew up in a family that had served God. Like my grandfather and my great grandfather and grandmother, they were followers of Christ. And Spirit-filled followers of Christ. And I believe my grandfather and my dad, they grew kind of away from it. By the time it got to me, we didn't attend church. We didn't do any of that. I was raised with what everyone believes, just what we're raised with, that even religion is a silly thing. I grew to have even more animosity toward it as I got older. But anyway, that's kind of how I felt all the way through high school, into young adulthood. It wasn't until Chris was born, my firstborn, that seeing that life come into the world, seeing that happen, changed me, and I didn't run to Jesus at that point or anything like that, but I could no longer say I'm an atheist, because I just felt there was more. There was just more to it. Not much explanation for that, but I mean, that my firstborn changed me, and turned me from believing there was nothing but matter and energy. I raised him. That was about the time Chrissy got saved, and I listened to her, and I got interested in it. It drew me in a little bit. I really like the idea of Jesus, of dying for your friends, of dying to save the world, and that kind of noble thing. But I didn't grasp what it was truly about, to be honest. I even I went up front to the altar when they called, and I repeated the prayer, and I even later got dunked underwater for good measure in front of everyone, was declared saved. I thought I was a Christian. I thought I knew what all that was. And I went on with my life, and by the time, right after Chris, by the time things were going good and stuff, I ended up addicted to pain pills, and always, oh man, that was hard. That was the first time I had tasted addiction, but that's that led me to a place where we built up, and things got better and better. But I knew that this habit was gonna keep escalating until it destroyed everything. So I went and sought help at about I was about 31, and that's when I went to the methadone clinic, and I got on that. And being able to budget and get everything on schedule, and all this, man, me and Chrissy, we both thrived. We did really well with that. We built up, man, and it got me to the point where I want to kind of start. And I was 31, and I was at my job, and I was leaving, and walking down the stairs, I was thinking to myself, man, I just paid all the bills. We still got money in the bank. I'm leaving my awesome job, walking down to hop on my motorcycle with my long Viking braid hanging down my back, I'm going home to my beautiful wife, who's making my favorite dinner. It was zuppa toscana that night. And my two awesome boys who, I just love and am blessed with, and I was just like, man, I got this whoop. Look what I did. I praised myself straight up. Praised myself. Went and hopped on the bike and went home like I did every day at that point. Well, I didn't make it home that day. I ended up, coming to in the hospital weeks later. I think I was out for 19 days before I came to. Maybe I regained consciousness and talked to them a few times before that, but I don't remember any of that. It was then that I came to, and when I came to, I woke up with my arm, my right arm, my dominant hand at the time. It didn't work at all. It didn't function. It's completely flailed. It's just hangs there. No hand movement whatsoever. It's just useless. So, I woke up like that, and when I woke up, of course, having gone to church and talked all that stuff, and even with people visiting me there, I was very thankful to be alive. I was happy that happened. And one lady warned me, the real test begins when we get home. So she was absolutely right. Once I got home, I had the external fixator on my left hand, the one that I had to use. So that complicated things even more, trying to do anything. Even reaching into the refrigerator was a task without knocking over stuff. But anyway, it healed up. But I mean, this started my downward spiral, man, to hit rock bottom. Things just started falling. I say falling apart, but it was just the world. It was just life coming as it did. Things working out how they worked out. The first kind of kick was there was going to be no insurance payoff, or however you want to say it. I wasn't going to get any kind of big settlement or anything, and they couldn't fix my arm. The actual injury that causes this is called an avulsed brachial plexus. It's the nerve that controls all this whole arm, your hand, all that stuff. Well, whenever I impacted the car, it pulled that out, root and all, out of the spine. So it just completely unplugged it, and they can't fix it. Yeah, to this point, I don't know. It's been years now. Maybe they've come up with something that works, but I'm not. Anyway, I'm not too worried about that at this point. But just one thing after another. A car we were $300 from paying off gets barely totaled, and we're left with that. Then I try so hard to make myself whole and get right where I was. The same kind of car, just these things. I made a couple of compromises and ended up with a broke down car 2 weeks after we got it, and it was just life. It was just life, one thing after another, and it was more than I could handle. It was more than I could take. I couldn't take it anymore, man. There came a point where, nothing helped. Science couldn't help me. Religion didn't help me. Jesus wasn't helping me. Nothing was helping me. I was just miserable. I hated life, man. I hated it every day. I just wanted to die. I wanted to die so bad. For 2 years, every day, every 5 minutes at least, suicidal thoughts would go through my mind. I had this thing that I would go through real quick. It was like my wife can find someone to love and take care of her. My job can replace me. My dad will get over it, but I'd always get to my two boys, and I knew that no one who stepped up in my place would love them like I'll love them, And again, I said this a million times. I know it sounds noble when it comes out like this, and I'm testifying this way, but it wasn't a noble thing. I just felt stuck. I was upset that I couldn't kill myself, And it was hard, man. It was hard to get to that point where you longed for nothing but to be out of this. That's what I was full of. I couldn't hardly speak without talking about how much I hated not having my arm. And when you see my face, my body language, I was just broken, man. Broken everywhere. I was still coming to work. I was doing what I had to do, but I was broken, There's nothing I could do. There was nothing science could do. There was nothing modern medicine could do. There was nothing that religion did at that point. There was nowhere to go. I was completely empty and without hope. I had the most awesome, you can imagine, support system around me. My wife never left my side. Everyone. My work came together, helped put money together, and do garage sales and stuff to help pay for her surgery. I mean, it was really, really amazing. I was a very lucky person in a lot of ways, surrounded by people, but never felt more alone, never felt more empty or broken. And that's what led to it. The point where I hit my knees, the proverbial knee hitting. But at the time, I didn't hit my knees calling out for God or Jesus or any of that stuff. I believed that I already knew what that was, and it did not help. It didn't help me at that point. I like the idea of Jesus, but I live in the real world, and I got bills to pay and stuff to deal with, and he's not helping with that. He's not doing anything for me. So at that point, that's how I felt. If I had ever believed in God truly, I didn't believe at him when I hit my knees. When I hit my knees, I was done, man. I literally, what I said was, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. World, you win. I quit. And I didn't say it all clear-eyed and matter of fact like that. I was blubbering. I was a mess. I was broken. I couldn't do this anymore, man. It was as low as you can feel. It was as low as you could feel. I felt so bad, man. I just wanted to die. I could easily cut my wrist and not even feel it. I had such easy ways out, but that father-son bond I didn't even know what he was telling me at the time, but it's strong. It was stronger than anything I ever have experienced. But in itself, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because that didn't help me. It didn't fix me. It just made sure I didn't kill myself. But anyway, I dragged my sloppy mess of a self up and got in bed that night and went to sleep. And woke up the next day as I had been doing, man, got dressed, dragged myself to work as usual. And at work, it was funny because I made a weird comment, just off the wall comment, to Stacy, the front desk receptionist at the time. And I told her, I was like, man, I feel like I have an umbilical cord to the Holy Spirit. And that was kind of a strange thing to say, because even as a Christian, I didn't talk much about Jesus. I didn't ever think about that stuff too much, other than, I identified myself as a Christian, and I went to church when I felt like it, things like that, and at that point, I went back in my office and I was doing whatever I was doing. It's right around lunchtime, and that's when it hit me. That's when I knew something was crazy, because it hit me so hard. The whole world shook, to me, but everybody else was just going about their business, just playing. But when it hit me, it was like, I haven't thought about killing myself all day, because I hadn't thought one time about suicide. And for 2 years, I had thought about suicide every 5 minutes, every day. Every time I was awake, I couldn't walk down the side of the road without wanting to throw myself out in front of a truck or car or whatever, I just wanted to die. And I hadn't thought that all day, and I was amazed. And it was at that point that I knew whatever happened, it was God. And Jesus Christ was his son. And for the sake of making this video short and keeping it all compact and stuff, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was when he granted me repentance. That's when I saw my way for what it was. It was futile. There was no hope. There was no other avenue. It was just death, brokenness, hopelessness. There was just nowhere to go, and I had enough. And when I hit my knees and gave up, I threw my hands up in surrender. I didn't know what I was doing. Praise God. I'm glad that it worked this way for me, because it helps me to testify and help tell people that, it's not us that do anything. I walked to the front and I made my decision, but this time it didn't work like that. What I did was go and give I didn't even know. I just knew that my way was no way. I knew that my way was garbage and futile, and there was no future in it, and that I had been alive for 33 years of my life and accomplished absolutely nothing, when in fact, I had a wife and kid. I had so much. I had so much blessing, but I was so depressed. I couldn't see it. I was blind to it. And anyway, from that point, man, he drew me straight to his word, man. At this point, it's pretty standard fare, I went straight to his word, straight to John, started reading John, didn't get past chapter 3 before he's telling Nicodemus, you must be born again to enter the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus is like, how can a man be born again? What do I do? Go back in my mother's womb and come out? That doesn't make sense. And Jesus said, that which is born of flesh is flesh, that which is born of spirit is spirit. And to see the kingdom of heaven, one must be born again. And that's when I knew. I went out to Stacy and I was like, I think I was born again. And that was the beginning. That's what changed my heart. We're talking about, and it doesn't happen this way for everyone. God works in each one of us in different ways. I have to make that clear, because I like my testimony. Of course, I love my testimony. I believe it's powerful. I believe that it means a lot, and it's got I can put a lot of flash or flare on it, but, that it does not happen that way for everyone. To some people, my wife, for instance, she came to Christ and was reborn in a room quiet with the Bible to herself. She sought him out and found him, That's amazing to me, Then one of the most amazing testimonies to me is those who have served him their life like they never even remember a time that they weren't in him, and that's pretty rare, and each one of us has a purpose, so we don't have to be jealous or feel like, oh, I'm a little bit less or whatever. No, God treasures all of us, and he took a sinner like me. And by his grace, see, when I hit my knees, I didn't even make a confession. I didn't do anything. I just gave up my way. And he picked me up. He picked me up. Jesus picked me up that day. And that's when I was made new. I woke up that next day new. I went home. I went to the video game console to start playing video games. That was my hobby. That's what I like to do, I couldn't play it, man. I put in Grand Theft Auto 5, and all I could think about is, dang, I wonder what my sons are doing. I wonder what my wife is doing. There's probably something I can do with my time more productive than this, There's probably something better I can feed my brain than this. And I turned it off and went and, that was it for, I want to say lifelong, but, as old as I could be to play video games, from then on I have loved them. That's my hobby. That's what I was always into. That's what I read articles on, all that kind of stuff. And overnight, my desire for that was gone. It wasn't something I'm like, oh, these are evil, I'm not going to do them anymore, and made a rule for myself. It doesn't work like that. It can't. We're slaves of sin. We're slaves to the flesh. That's the problem. That's why we must be born again, to see these things and begin the process of sanctification, to begin the process of him by his Spirit leading us to be more like him, to be more like what we were created to be. We were created to be connected to God. The fall severed that connection. We're born disconnected. We're born broken. Jesus Christ came, born of the virgin, not of Adam, not born of sin, lived a perfect life, never transgressing the Father's will, never sinning, never earning the wages of death. Jesus didn't earn death for himself. Jesus earned life. Jesus was life. He told us that our ways were wicked, and for that, we crucified him. We crucified him. We nailed him to a cross. And, the people, by that the people, I don't mean any, but I'm telling you right now, put him in a mob right now of something and let him tell them that they're wrong. He'd be crucified today too. He'd be crucified today too, because that's what we are in the flesh. We believe we hold the knowledge of what's good and evil. And how does that work out when every single person believes that they hold the knowledge of good and evil? And I disagree with what you say is evil, and you disagree with what I say. Who wins? Does might make right? Whoever's got the biggest stick, whoever's got the longest range gun. Well, I mean, that's the problem, because we always feel we're right, and we can always justify anything by that. And that's why Jesus Christ stepped onto earth, onto his creation, and he lived a life that was an example of how we were created to be, to each other, to our God, to everything. And then he was killed. But being nailed to the cross, that was not the price that bought our justification. When he was on that cross, the wrath that abided over mankind's head, all the wrath of God that abided over men's head for their sin, was poured out on Jesus Christ on that cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? In Isaiah, it says it pleased the Lord to crush him for our iniquities, because he knows the glory of reconciliation, of redemption, of redeeming the whole creation. That's what our King stepped on this planet to do and accomplished. He's now seated at the right hand of God, with all authority in heaven and on earth granted to him, reigning until every enemy has been made a footstool for his feet. That's the King that I serve. That's where I come from. This is why, because my spirit has been resurrected. It has been made alive by his grace, by nothing I did. It was nothing I did. I didn't go grab the Bible and read it and be like, okay, I believe this. It's not how it works. It's not. I didn't even read the Bible in a serious way ever before I was reborn. It works opposite of how you would think it would work in most cases. But then he transforms us and sends us out and tells us, go, make disciples of all nations. He does not make any distinction between race, color, country, anything. He said, make disciples of all nations.